in fact, will be amazed that there is a lot of stuff in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that we may not get to do because of our busy schedule in the month of Ramadan. So I want us to think of this as an opportunity, not as a challenge or a calamity or something like that. And also we'll be seeing some examples where we might have a golden opportunity to do something the Prophet did that we don't do anymore. But what I want to do first is to start with a passage from the Quran. And I know it is customary that when we read about Ramadan in the Quran, we always go to Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, and specifically to verses 183 up to 186. And if you have a copy of the Quran, if you have a Mus'haf, I encourage you to open the Mus'haf and, on those verses and participate, inshallah. But I'm not going to read those because those are so common. And because this Ramadan is uncommon or different, I want to read actually a verse that is usually left out. And this is the last verse in this passage. So there's only one passage in the Quran that talks about Ramadan, right? And that, like I said, that is Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, 183 to 186. I'm going to read actually verse number 187. And verse 187 is also part of the same context, the same passage, but it talks about some subtleties or some maybe exceptions, if you will, and it has some historical significance. So let me read it first, inshallah, and then we'll talk about it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل ولا تباشروهن وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد تلك حدود الله فلا تقربوها كذلك يبين الله آياته للناس لعلهم يتقون. So this surah is, rather this verse is about half a page, and this verse talks about what is allowed. So we know when we talk about fasting, we talk about what is prohibited. We're not supposed to eat. We're not supposed to have, intimate relationships with our spouses, etc. It is interesting, though, in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about what is allowed. And that is because of a reason. We know that fasting, the fasting of Ramadan, that is, was legislated in Medina in the second year after Hijrah. Before that, of course, we had the fasting of Ashura. There was also voluntary fasting. But the first time the fasting of a whole month was mandatory was in the second year after Hijrah. But initially, there was a phase when fasting was slightly different, as we know it today. Fasting was such that if you broke fast at Maghrib, you're allowed to eat until Isha or until you fall asleep. And after that, you have to start your fasting. So usually you would start your fasting after Isha or maybe after you fall asleep. And it so happened that one of the companions who was working in the field, and he came in the evening, he was exhausted. And he asked for food, and his wife said, well, I don't have any food right away. I have to go and prepare some food for you. So she went, and in the process of preparing the food, that companion fell asleep. So she came back, and she found him asleep, and she said, woe to you. Now you cannot eat anymore because, your time is up. And the companion had to, continue to the next day without any food. until came about noon and he passed out because obviously he hadn't had food for at least 24 hours. And on top of that, because he was exhausted from work. So this is when this ayah was revealed to tell people that it is okay to enjoy the whole night, that the whole night was made halal for you as far as anything that is prohibited in the day, food, drink, and a relationship. And this is how the ayah starts. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. Now this is interesting because, like I said, usually when we talk about Ramadan, we always tend to think of what is restricted, what is not allowed, what is prohibited. But I think this ayah brings a new light to fasting. The fact that also we should take it easy and think about the blessings, think about what is available to us. Also remember in the previous page, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions the concept of yusr. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ease for us, He doesn't want hardship for us. And this is why He mentioned what is, or the people who are allowed to break fast in the month of Ramadan, such as the people who are sick or the people who are traveling. So we see throughout these verses some emphasis on the fact that Ramadan is not there to make it hard for us, rather it is for our own good and our own benefit. Verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions kulu washrabu, you eat and you drink until dawn. I'm not going to go into each and every part of the ayah. I want to just get the theme of the ayah, inshallah. And then he said, and then you continue fasting until night. In fact, this is the one verse that tells us when to start fasting and when to end fasting and what is not allowed. Of course, in the Sunnah, we get much more details, but these are the primary things about fasting. You learn it all from this verse as well. So it says, from dawn, you start the fast and you keep fasting until night. And the definition of night here is sunset. Okay, so let us now think about the fasting at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and Ramadan and the environment. I mean, one thing about Ramadan that we all miss and we all think about is this environment that we live in, the sense of community, the fact that we go and we find so many people at the masjid. No other time of the year you have so many people, breaking iftar together. There's so much brotherhood and sisterhood that goes on, and I think that's what people are worried about, that they're going to miss the most. But maybe we can think of our brotherhood with the Prophet ﷺ. Now remember, the Prophet once, he said, وَدَدْتُ لَوْ أَنِّي لَقِيتُ إِخْوَانِي. Imagine the Prophet saying that. He said, I wish that I have met my brothers. So, I mean, we all hope and pray that we are brothers of the Prophet. And the companions, they said, aren't we your brother? Aren't we brothers to you? And he said, no, you are my companions. My brothers are the people who come after me, and they wish that they have seen me. So to qualify to be a brother of the Prophet, ﷺ, I know we always think of the Prophet as someone, of course, above us in status, but the Prophet himself said that these are people who come after me, who would wish to see me. In some narrations, okay, someone was trying to share something. In some narrations, it said they would wish to see me even if they were to lose everything they have. So maybe this is something we can try this Ramadan. At least, I mean, think about it mentally, that we want to make the intention that you want to be a brother of the Prophet ﷺ. So why do I say that? Well, I know we're going to miss some aspect of brotherhood in the month of Ramadan this time, because we're not going to be able to see and meet these people, right? But think of it this way. I am a brother of the Prophet, and all I have to do is to wish to have seen the Prophet ﷺ. Now, one aspect to accomplish that is to think and to also read and study how the Prophet ﷺ conducted his Ramadan. And is it really like our Ramadan? Was there any differences between our Ramadan and the Ramadan of the Prophet ﷺ? So we might have to do some study to see how the Prophet ﷺ conducted himself in the month of Ramadan. All right. So let me attempt to do that. There is a narration in Sahih Imam al-Bukhari, and if you go to Sahih Imam al-Bukhari, you're going to find a chapter talking about Salat al-Tarawih. And it's a short chapter. And in one of those hadith in the chapter, Aisha radiallahu anha narrates. And she's narrating to her nephew Urwa. We know Urwa is the son of Urwa ibn Zubayr. He's the son of Zubayr ibn al-Awwam. And we know, Az-Zubayr was married to Asma, and Asma was the sister of Aisha. Okay? So Az-Zubayr would be the son of Asma, so he is a nephew to Aisha radiallahu anha. So someone is sharing something. Okay.
Brothers and sisters, can you please let our speaker to talk? Please do not share anything now.
All right. Okay, so this is imagine this is a conversation between Urwa radiallahu anh and Aisha, his aunt. So Aisha radiallahu anha was speaking to Urwa, and she said, she's telling Urwa about the Ramadan of the Prophet ﷺ and how he used to pray at night. So she said, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج ليلة من جوف الليل فصلى في المسجد. So again, this is the night of Ramadan, right? And she said, the Prophet ﷺ came out of his house in the middle of the night and he prayed in the masjid. Now you gotta imagine, this is unprecedented. The people were not used to seeing the Prophet ﷺ come out in the middle of the night in Ramadan and pray in the masjid. So, but some people were there and they prayed with the Prophet ﷺ. It was a small jama'ah because not many people knew that the Prophet was gonna come out and pray in the masjid. So it says, فَأَصْبَحَ النَّاسُ فَتَحَدَّثُوا. People, the next day, were talking about what happened last night. Something happened, something new happened. The Prophet came out and he prayed, and some people prayed behind him. So now the next night, more people knew, right? So more people gathered and waited for the Prophet ﷺ. فاجتمع أكثر منهم the next day. فصلى فصلوا معه. So he prayed and they prayed with him. And again, the next morning, people woke up and they were talking about what happened last night. فأصبح الناس فتحدثوا فكثر أهل المسجد من الليلة الثالثة. So the third night, many people gathered, right? And the Prophet ﷺ came out and he also prayed. He also prayed in the masjid as an imam, and many people prayed behind him. فلما كانت الليلة الرابعة, when the fourth night came, عجز المسجد عن أهله. The masjid was not big enough to contain all these people, to have all these people, meaning so many people came. Because now the news spread about the Prophet ﷺ praying in the masjid, right? And in Ramadan. So many people came out and the masjid was not able to handle that many people. But the Prophet ﷺ did not come out. حتى خرج لصلاة الصبح. He waited until the time of Fajr. So the Prophet came out at the time of Fajr, at the time of dawn. فلما قضى الفجر, when he prayed Fajr and he finished, he completed, he turned around, أقبل على الناس, he turned around, فتشهد, he said the shahada, as if, starting a small speech. And then he said, أما بعد فإنه لم يخف علي مكانكم. He said, I was well aware of your positions, meaning I was well aware that you guys came at night and waited for me. So it's not that I was not aware of it or that I've forgotten about you. That's not the reason. Rather, he said, ولكني خشيت أن تفرض عليكم فتعجزوا عنها. He said, I was afraid that it will be made obligatory on you, and then you will not be able to do it. And this is very crucial here. I mean, some people might think that Taraweeh is mandatory, and this is a clear text that says it is not. Of course, it is highly recommended, no doubt about that, because the Prophet said, alayhi salam, in a different hadith, "Man qama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbih." If you stand up and pray in the month of Ramadan out of iman and out of anticipation for reward, then Allah will forgive all your previous sins. So it's highly, highly recommended, but it is not mandatory. So he said, I was afraid if I was to lead you every night, you would think that praying it in congregation becomes obligatory on you. Because if the Prophet ﷺ kept doing something, his action is unlike any action of anyone else, even the companions. So if he did something on a consistent basis, people might take from it that this action has now become mandatory. So then it would be mandatory to go and pray in the masjid, Taraweeh, the prayer of Taraweeh. So he said, I was afraid that it becomes mandatory, and then you would not be able to do it. You would not be able to, fulfill that obligation. So that's the reason. And then it says, the narration says, فَتُوفِيَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَالْأَمْرُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. And the Prophet ﷺ died, and this is how he left it. Like nothing else happened, nothing else changed in the legislation of Salatul Taraweeh. So this is how it was done. Meaning, and this is where the scholars come in, like Ibn Hajar and others, and they said, it means that people did not pray Taraweeh in congregation in the masjid until the Prophet died. So they went back to the old way, which is everybody prays individually in the house. Okay, and then the other narration says, ثم كان الأمر على ذلك في خلافة أبي بكر وصدرا من خلافة عمر. And this matter stayed the same way, the duration of Abu Bakr's leadership, and also a part of the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anh, part of the reign of Umar radiallahu anh, it was also like that. Until we know what happened at the time of Umar when he came once in the masjid and he saw people praying separately, maybe in smaller jama'as, smaller groups here and there. And then he united all of them under the leadership of Ubay radiallahu anh. So my point here is, we know that, and this is not something we're going to debate, we know that it is highly recommended to pray in the masjid and everything. But today we are dealing with a very, very special situation, right? And this is a situation of, this is a situation where we cannot, it's not up to us, even to pray in the masjid, right? So maybe one thing to think about is, and remember what I was starting to talk about, the fact that, the Prophet ﷺ considered us brothers, right, to him. And the fact that the Prophet, throughout his life, at least when Ramadan was legislated, the vast majority of the times, he prayed in his house. He prayed Taraweeh in his house. And think about it this way. Think about it as an opportunity to do it like the Prophet ﷺ. Now, as far as a prayer in the house, it's going to be a bit challenging because some people may not have the discipline to do it on their own. So this is where we have to maybe exert some effort. But it's really important when we do an act of worship, is not just to focus on the mechanics of the acts. I know sometimes we tend to focus too much on that, and to think about it. This is why I'm mentioning the Prophet too much, ﷺ, because I want you to maybe kind of imagine how the Prophet ﷺ spent his Ramadan. There were no communal iftars at the time of the Prophet as we are used to. Maybe there were a few because the Prophet obviously encouraged that, but the companions were very, very poor. It's not like, every day, we were throwing these outlandish iftar feasts. And it depends. Even in our communities, some communities are richer than other communities. So some communities might have had plenty of food, and subhanallah, sometimes I see some feast maybe over social media, and there's so much extravagance and there's so much waste of food. So what I want us to think about this Ramadan is going back and think about the times of the Prophet ﷺ. Not just how he prayed Taraweeh, which we know he prayed individually in the house. And by the way, he did not just pray in the month of Ramadan. In the same chapter, Imam al-Bukhari, and he's very, very intelligent when it comes to placing his hadith, his narrations. I mean, every hadith is put in the right place for the right reason. So you see in that same chapter, the Prophet ﷺ narrates the hadith from Abu Huraira and others, I think, but from Abu Huraira mainly. He said, "Man qama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban." So he's linking the two. He's linking the fact that the Prophet said, "Whoever stands in the month of Ramadan," and here it mentions qiyam in the singular form. Okay, it says, "Whoever stands in the month of Ramadan and pray, his past sins will be forgiven." And then right after that, Ibn Shihab, he quotes Ibn Shihab, who was a tabi'i, and it says, the Prophet ﷺ died while the people were on that state. State of what? State of that hadith. Man qama Ramadan iman wa ihtisaban, in a singular form. So think about it that way. But the Prophet, we know he prayed qiyam every night of the year. The other hadith of Aisha, that the Prophet never stopped praying, these usual 8 rak'ah plus, the few rak'ah of witr. And of course, later at the time of Umar, or even later, they also came up with the 20, number 20. And the reason was because the 8 were not easy. Because one of the descriptions of Aisha radiallahu anha about the prayer of the Prophet, she said, فَلَا تَسْأَلْ عَنْ حُسْنِهِنَّ وَطُولِهِنَّ. Like you can't even imagine how long and how beautiful these rak'ahs were, these prayers were. But because it is really hard on the body, and by the way, people who pray 8 today, they kind of cheat. I mean, I'm not being harsh here, but they try, they don't make it long. So if you want to say, I want to pray like the Prophet ﷺ, you're not really doing that. See, the idea here, when they came up with the 20 was supposed to kind of match the 8 in duration. But the difference is, instead of making long rak'ah, you would make him more. So here the number compensates for the duration. But at the end, they should kind of even out. They should be equal. But because when you make more movements, it's easier on the back. When you make more ruku' and sujood, it's easier on the back. This is why they came up with 20. So the 20 was not really to give you an allowance to read less. It's more to make it easy on the body. This is just a tangent here. But think about it. So this is one aspect. This is why I want to come in, inshallah, and now maybe give you some ideas. How can we approach this Ramadan differently? So let's say now we cannot pray in the masjid and we're missing that ajr, we're missing that reward. Of course, we have a reason, so it's not that we're doing it on purpose. But the question is, how can I compensate for that? So now let's go back to how the Prophet prayed. The Prophet prayed long rak'ah, right? I know a lot of people complain. They say, well, I go to this masjid and the imam is super fast. I don't have time to read Fatiha. In my madhab, I have to read Fatiha, right? And I don't have time to even focus on my ruku' or sujood before my head is on the ground. I don't even know if it stood still, because, in every rukun, you have to stand still. You can't just, go up and down quickly. You have to settle. That's what we call it. Settle. You have to settle. So they say, this imam is so fast. I can't even, say anything. I can't have my tuma'nina, my tranquility in prayer. Well, here's your solution. Now you are home. You are praying on your own. So you may not be able to maybe pray the 20. Maybe you're not disciplined enough. Maybe you don't memorize enough Quran. But there's no one stopping you from making the ruku' a little longer, from making the sujood a little longer. So, all the complaints you had in the past about the fast imams, right? The imams who are going to fast. This is your opportunity to maybe pray something like the prayer of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, of course, you may not make it as long because the Prophet might have prayed, if not the entirety of the night, but a large portion of the night. And, in some hadith, it might have mentioned that he prayed until Fajr or right before Fajr. But now is your opportunity. No one is after you. No one is dictating how long the ruku' and sujood. And I know some masajid do it really nice, even in the masjid. Some imams, mashallah, I know our imam here, I see our imam Ahmed, he's very good in this. He gives time to people. But think about many other masajid, it's really fast. So now you're the king. You determine how long the rak'ahs should be. This is important because I think this is one aspect of worship that we have lost track of, which is to focus on the peace in the salat. Like, why would the Prophet ﷺ tell Bilal, "Arihna ya Bilal fi salat"? Oh, Bilal, starts, make that takbir, the adhan and iqamah so that we can start, because that will give us peace and tranquility. So the Prophet looked at salat as something to settle in. وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ, like the settlement of my eye. What does that mean? I mean, we hear a lot of words from the Prophet, but we have to think about it. Imagine like there's something you like to look at in such a way that you don't want to move your eyes from it. Like certain things you look at and then you get bored, right? But قُرَّةُ الْعَيْن is when you look at something and you don't want to move your eyes away from it. This is how much you enjoy looking at something. That's قُرَّةُ الْعَيْن. So the Prophet said, وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ, meaning if I enter salat, I do not want to exit the salat. So again, I don't think I don't know, I hope we can attend that level, but we may not be there yet. But think about it, this is maybe something I can accomplish in this month of Ramadan. Maybe the masjid has been taken away from me, but there's something else I want to try this Ramadan. Maybe I want to accomplish some of that peace and tranquility. Maybe I'll spend a bit more time in the salat so I can at least experience that. It is narrated that Abdullah ibn Zubair, when he prayed, he would take so long in ruku'ah. And of course, I mean, he was standing still. He was like making ruku'ah and not moving. The birds would land on his back, thinking that he was a rock or a tree. This is just some of our predecessors. Imam al-Bukhari once, when he was praying, he was stung by, I think he counted like 16 or 17 different stings from a bee or a bumblebee or something like that, and he did not move. He did not want to leave. And also one of the companions, he was supposed to be guarding the camp, and he decided to go into prayer while guarding, and he was shot with an arrow, and he was bleeding, and he was contemplating whether he should leave the salat or not. He was enjoying the salat too much. He didn't want to leave it. So we have examples like that from our history. And I'm saying this Ramadan might be a good opportunity to try some of that. Again, we're not going to get to that level maybe, but even if we got to the 100th of it, I think that'd be a great, great accomplishment. So my point here is that in this month of Ramadan, we're going to have to change our focus, and we don't have to innovate. Like some people think, well, if I'm not going to do this, maybe I have to be creative. That means I have to innovate. No, we have so many examples from our history that we've probably forgotten about. But now it is a time to invoke it again and to study it and to think about it and to maybe do some of that. Start, practicing some of that. Now, again, also because this month, this time around, we're going to be at home. So on one hand, we're going to have more time on our hand. At least we don't have to commute to work. And this is actually a blessing in disguise, because I know some people, they used to work right after Fajr. They have time to sleep. So you kind of, and I say a lot of times, sleep is a bigger challenge than food and drink in the month of Ramadan, because, you come back from the masjid or even home, you have to wait until Fajr, you pray Fajr, and then you go
I lost to Sheikh Anas and his voice too.
Yeah, all of us. I
Yeah,
think.
Yeah. Sanas, are you still there? We cannot hear you.
yeah, seems like he dropped.
Yeah, looks like probably poor connection.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Is it Sheikh Anas?
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know what happened. I think I got dropped. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay, inshallah. So, inshallah, I'm about done. I want to finish with maybe some tips. I was saying, though, sleep is a challenge to many people. And I know some people, like, you barely can squeeze maybe 1 hour or two after Fajr, and then you have to wake up and go to work. And then when you come back, you probably squeeze another 2 hours maybe before sunset, unless you have to help in the kitchen. And then after Taraweeh, you probably again squeeze another 2 hours before you have to wake up for suhoor. So you know it is really a challenge, and you don't get sleep except in some fragments. So this time around, think of it, it's a blessing that if you're not going to work, if you're working from home, you can definitely work your schedule a little better. At least, even if you have to start at 8, you don't have to drive while half asleep like a zombie. And you know, sometimes I worry if I'm gonna go have an accident because I'm falling asleep on the steering wheel, literally. I mean, sometimes when you're coming back from work, you're exhausted, you haven't had enough sleep. At 5 p.m., you start drowsing off as you sleep, as you drive, rather. So this is a blessing that this time, at least we can maybe work on a better schedule. But at the end, you're going to get more time on your schedule. The fact that you're not driving, commuting, that's going to save you time. Also, working from home will give you a better, a more flexible schedule, and you're going to have a bit more energy. And this is why I want to make sure we channel that time and energy in the right way. So let us think after what I discussed, like making the prayer a little longer, praying like the Prophet ﷺ, thinking of the Prophet and the fact that he did something, and we're doing something similar to what he did. But also, we want to also find certain acts of worship that we probably haven't had a chance to do in the past. Let me give you an example. There is a well-known hadith, authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, لِلصَّائِمِ عِنْدَ فِطْرِهِ دَعْوَةٌ لَا تُرَدْ, that the fasting person will have a moment of dua that will not be rejected. And that happens after breaking fast. So, you know, Maghrib time, you break fast, that time, you have a window of opportunity, a window of time to make dua. And the Prophet said, this is a time when the dua is answered. It's not going to be rejected. Of course, you know, any hadith like that, of course, you know, you have to think of also that you're not violating anything else. I mean, there's certain things that if you violate, your dua may never be accepted. But this is not the discussion. What happened in the past, I think, to many people, and they might have known about this opportunity, but because the time was so short, you know, by the time you finish eating, barely you have time to, you know, get in the car and race to the masjid, especially if you want to be in the, you know, the first row or the first rows. So it becomes a challenge to focus on these acts. So you might have made a dua, you know, quickly so that you get the ajr, and you might have forgotten some days because you were really in a hurry. But think about it this time around. This time, there's no rush. There's no jama'ah to catch. You have much more time and you have more flexibility. So why not take out some time? Like you break fast, even if you have to leave, maybe go outside a little bit so you can focus, because now you have more time. You could put maybe 5-10 minutes or even more, and focus on dua. Like make it, you know, part of your schedule. And there's nothing to miss here. There's nothing to lose, right? And then you can come back later and you have all the food you want. Also, I mean, even the prayer, we know there is some virtue in delaying Isha, so you can delay Isha. But more so, you can even delay Taraweeh if you're able to wake up later in the night. Again, this goes back to the flexibility I'm talking about. In fact, Umar radiallahu anhu, when he asked the Muslims, or he commanded the Muslims to unite under Ubay in Taraweeh, he made a statement at the end, and he said, وَالَّتِي يَنَامُونَ عَنْهَا أَفْضَلُ. He said, There's a time of the night that if they prayed, it would have been better, but people won't be able to do it. So like if these people delayed, all of them delayed until the latter part of the night, because we know the last third is more blessed, then it would have been better. But of course, Umar did it because he knew if he delayed it, not as many people will show. So this is also another thing to think about. Again, you're the king, you decide your schedule, and you could do it the way you want. So that I want us to look at that as a positive thing. Maybe a few more ideas. Breaking fast with the family, that's also great this time around. It's time maybe to teach your kids or to have a conversation. Teaching doesn't have to be like, I tell you what to do. Another aspect that is important, and I want us to focus this time around on the aspects of the heart, because again, Ramadan is such a race. We've turned it into a race. Now we have more time, and we have more time with ourselves. And that's really important. Just like the Prophet had a lot of time with himself, like in the month of Ramadan, he was praying. Remember, most of his prayer in his house, right? Think about it this way: you have a better opportunity to grow your sincerity, because there's no one to show, there's no one to impress. You cannot brag that you had the best iftar in town, and there's no one watching you. You're on your own. So in a way, it's better for your sincerity, and to think about the fact that this is an act between you and Allah. No one is watching, no one is looking at you. So that's also important, because sincerity is the basis of all our worship. One more aspect, inshallah, before I open it for questions. Ramadan is a month of contemplation, and contemplation itself, and it is mentioned in the Quran as tadabbur, which is to reflect and contemplate. It is an act of worship that has been forgotten. In fact, some of the early Muslims have made that observation. Imagine at that time, they said that act has kind of disappeared. So what can we say about our time? Anyway, I think this time around, because you have more time, especially because you're by yourself or just with your family, it is a good time to contemplate and to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like let's say you go outside, especially in the day, you're not being interrupted with meal after meal, snack after snack. I know now we're sitting home, a lot of people are getting a bit heavier, and because we're snacking all the time. Now, because you have that extra time on your hand, and because you're not going to work or going to school, you're going to have more time to do those acts of worship. So take out some time, go outside, look at nature, look at the creation of Allah, look at the skies and the trees and whatever you can look at, and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are a basic act of worship. But remember, in the month of Ramadan, any act is multiplied by many times. So whatever it is, whether it is recitation of the Quran or dhikr or contemplation, tadabbur, any of these things. Likewise, also at night, like I said, making the ruku' and the sujood longer, you can also use that to make more dhikr. Like you can repeat Subhana Rabbiyal A'la more than 3 times. Some people think you only can say it 3 times. And then you can make all the dua you want in sujood. Now is the time to do that. So I want us to think about those acts of worship that are maybe individual in nature, that we probably haven't done in the past as much. Now is the opportunity to focus on those, rather than lamenting the fact that we cannot go to the masjid. Oh, I cannot be in this group. I cannot see the imam. Oh, I cannot listen to this beautiful recitation. I think there are plenty of things to do. They have a different flavor. Maybe we haven't tasted that flavor in the past, maybe not enough. But now maybe let's focus on that, so we see or we experience another flavor of the month of Ramadan, perhaps in some respects closer to the way the Prophet ﷺ experienced his Ramadan. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to enjoy it at least as much as we have enjoyed it in the previous years. So now, inshallah, exactly 8:45, very punctual, alhamdulillah. I can stop, inshallah, and listen to your comments.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Anas. Brothers and sisters, if you have question, please unmute your microphone and briefly ask your question to Sheikh Anas. Any questions, brothers and sisters?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I like to ask, if we do the Taraweeh at the end of the night, should we do the Tahajjud too?
Okay. I don't feel comfortable answering questions while Imam Muharram, but if he gives me the permission, and please, Imam, interrupt me if you're still listening. You can interrupt me anytime. So let me clarify one thing. Back then, there was not really a distinction between Taraweeh and Qiyam the way we do it today. So today, I think when we talk about, the prayers in Ramadan, we kind of classify them into Taraweeh, which usually happens in the beginning of the night, and then we have Qiyam, which usually happens at the end of the night. And these are fine, these are conventions that we have now kind of agreed on. But at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed only once. Like if he prayed in the beginning of the night, let's say, he would pray maybe until the middle or maybe until later, but he did not really divide it into like two separate groups of prayers. And even like when we talk about Taraweeh and Qiyam, they were not really distinguished like we distinguish them today. They were like different names for the same thing. So Taraweeh, we know Taraweeh was, the reason it was called Taraweeh was because, again, they were praying for too long, right? Like the two rak'ah were taking too long a time. So they felt like they needed a rest between the first two and the second two, for example, okay? Or maybe the first four and the other four. And that rest was also long. And that's what Taraweeh means. I mean, if you look at the word Taraweeh from Raha is rest. So that's why it was called Taraweeh for that reason. Qiyam, of course, is Qiyam. So it's anytime you stand up in prayer in the night, it's called Qiyam, whether it's in Ramadan or outside of Ramadan. So that distinction was not there. Like we said at the time of Umar, he said if that Taraweeh was prayed at the end of the night, it would have been better. Same thing, we still could have called it Taraweeh, right? But he said if they delayed it until the end of the night. So those people who were praying Taraweeh in the beginning of the night, we're not going back necessarily and praying later at night. Of course, no one will stop you from praying later because the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, Salatul Layli mathna mathna. As we said, the numbers, I think we put so much significance on the numbers. I don't think the number has a significance, like whether it's 8, 11, 13, or 20. Imam Malik even said 40, because the Prophet never specified a number. When a man came to him and asked him about Qiyam, he said, Salatul Layli mathna mathna. If you want to pray at night, you pray 2, 2, 2. And when you're done, you pray witr, right? So this is why I personally don't see a bigger distinction. Again, I'm not saying there's a problem if you pray so-called Taraweeh in the beginning and then you pray Qiyam later. I'm just saying there's not a big distinction as we might think there is. I think there was
one question.
Oh, go ahead, yeah. Go ahead,
sister.
Jazakallah khair.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
There is one question came from one brother. He's asking, can we recite Quran on the cell phone without wudu?
Yes, if you mean outside the prayer, obviously. Yeah, I mean, no doubt it is preferable to, for any dhikr, any mention of God, that you have a state of tahara. One time, the Prophet ﷺ came upon Abu Huraira and he said salam, and the Prophet, Abu Huraira hid from the Prophet. He did not reply because he did not have a state of tahara. And he said, the Prophet asked him, why didn't you answer? He said, because I'm not in a state of tahara. He even want to say salam. Because salam, you could say it is one of the names of Allah also, right? And the Prophet said, "In al-mu'mina la yanjus," the believer does not go into a state of impurity. Of course, here it means the spiritual purity. So yes, you are allowed to recite Quran unless you are in a state of the greater impurity. Like if you have to take a shower, in that case, you should not recite Quran. You should not read Quran. But if you are in a state of minor impurity, like you only have to make wudu, in that case, you are allowed to recite Quran without wudu, but it is preferable that you have wudu.
Okay, thank you. Brothers and sisters, if you have question, we still have 5 more minutes, inshallah, for question and answer. If you have it, please unmute your microphone and briefly ask your question.
I think there was maybe one or two questions in the chat. Can you please tell us about praying in Jama'ah at home, husband, wife, and children? And did ICEV made a discussion to not have Taraweeh? That's not for me. This is for ICEV. So I'll just address.
Let me address the ICV question. So we decided not to have Taraweeh in the masjid till April 30th. If there is any further updates, inshallah, we will let you know, everyone.
Okay. And as far as praying Taraweeh at home, the organization is rather simple. I mean, you just stand in prayer. You're the imam, for example. Let's say you're the father, or the bigger brother or something like that. So you're the imam, and behind you stand the men, and then behind them stand the women. So that's all there is to it. You don't have. I mean, some people might separate like the younger boys. That's not necessary unless like they're too young and they could break the saf. If they don't have wudu, for example, you can make them stand at the end, at the the outer part of the line. But other than that, it's simple. Men then women, just like we do in the masjid, pretty much. Not much different.
Okay, thank you. Any more question, brothers and sisters? Last question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikh Anas. I have a question, inshallah. First of all, Jazakallah khairan for this good speech and reminder. May Allah accept from you. I would like to know your opinion about, based on your knowledge, inshallah, about Salat al-Qiyam remotely behind the TV or internet. So, inshallah ta'ala, if you can address this part based on your knowledge, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
I had a feeling, subhanAllah, you're going to ask that. So I mean, I'm well aware of the opinion of, I would say, the vast majority, if not, I don't know if it is a consensus, but I think it is a majority. I mean, at least in America, I've seen like AMJA and other fatwa committees clarify, and including some of my shuyukh like Sheikh Walid Idris and others, Minisi, to very clearly say that there's no such a thing as a congregational prayer from a distance. And no doubt, if we think about it, one of the, I mean, it's not even a condition, I would say, it's the way we define Jama'ah. Jama'ah, by definition, is when people are physically together, okay? So once you start taking that apart, then you can no longer call it Jama'ah per se. So for example, even the people who are saying we pray in Jama'ah, but we keep like 6 feet apart. And I'm thinking like, this is not Jama'ah anymore. This is not the definition of Jama'ah as we know it. So why, like, I don't know why we try and twist sometimes a definition so that it can fit a certain like expectation. So that is one part of it. However, having said that, so obviously the bigger problem here is that now if you do a virtual, now it's not just a few feet, it's miles and miles away. So that takes away the definition. However, having said that, I have my own, and tell me what you think. I don't think it is considered Jama'ah. However, I don't necessarily see a problem if an imam was to, let's say, lead, but he does it for different reasons. Let's say you are home and you are following the imam, but really he's not imam, like in the sense that he, for example, the hadith that talks about imam, if he read, then his reading is sufficient for you. According to some scholars, at least, like Abu Hanifa, for example, you don't have to even recite Fatiha. Imam is sufficient for you. So those things would not apply in this case because it's not really considered jama'ah. But I think the imam still can be a guide in the sense that many people, they cannot recite Quran on their own. They do not memorize the Quran. And it's really, really hard for them to lead Taraweeh in the house by themselves. Even if they were to open a Mus'haf, they don't read Quran. I mean, they make so many mistakes. So what if you prayed behind an imam and you recite your Fatiha, so you cannot rely on the recitation of the imam. You recite everything, like you have to recite, ruku' and sujood on your own. But the only part where you rely on the imam as a guide is the recitation of the second surah. And this is only for guidance. Just like, for example, you use the Mus'haf in front of you if you don't memorize, you can turn the page and you read from Mus'haf. So now it's like you're using that, as a tool to help you because you don't have enough on your own. You don't have, for example, memorization. And here you don't have even recitation. Now you might say, well, why not just use a CD or a YouTube, right? There's still a big difference. There's two differences actually. One is discipline. Many people will not on their own do that. Like they're not gonna every day they would go and press on YouTube and do that. But if they know that the imam is doing it every day at 8, for example, they might tune in and do their prayer. Again, it's considered individual prayer, but the imam is like a guide. So now it's forcing them to stand and to listen. But there's also another important factor, I think, and it's kind of sentimental. It is spiritual. And that is the fact that when you do it virtually like that, you still have a sense of community. Like, many people are participating. And the reason I thought of that, actually, it wasn't for this occasion. It happens so many times in the past. When I go, for example, to Lebanon, I notice many people, like my mother, for example, and others. When it was Ramadan, they would tune in to Al-Haram Al-Makki, right? I don't know if some of you have noticed that. And they pray behind them. Now, I think we should clarify to them that this is not necessarily considered jama'ah, so they should recite Al-Fatiha and everything else. But they live in such a high spirit when they're, listening to Sudais. And it's not just the listening, but also the fact they know it's happening as we speak. So it being alive is important too, because they feel like they're kind of participating in the event. And that, I felt like I should not take that away from them. But again, this is my, my opinion. But other than that, like I said, I don't think we can consider it jama'ah in the strict sense. But also we can invoke an example the fuqaha mentioned. If you are behind the imam, for example, and let's say you are way behind, like you are, following the imam, and all of a sudden, let's say the imam recited Fatiha too quickly, and you want to take your time reciting Fatiha. So imam goes to ruku', you're still fine. But once imam gets up from ruku' and you're still reciting Fatiha, scholars would consider that, they would consider you as someone who's no longer in the congregation in Salatul Jama'ah. Like you've exited the congregational aspect. But they don't say necessarily that your prayer is invalid. They say just continue prayer on your own. So that kind of maybe tells us that there are situations where you might lose the Jama'ah aspect, but you still have the individual aspect. So the Salat itself is still valid, but the congregational aspect is no longer valid. That's maybe a quick summary of my opinion. And now I'd like to hear your comments.
I just have one point. Would like to take your opinion also about it. If someone is standing in the masjid and he doesn't memorize Quran and want to pray long prayer, can he listen to recitation of someone sitting next to him is not praying? So the other person is not praying and he is opening the Quran and reading for himself. Can the musalli listen to his recitation and this will be valid as salah, or will be a problem for the prayer? What do you think?
Well, the fact that reciting the second surah is sunnah anyways. So the worst that can happen, let's say for some reason, that is not valid. What's going to happen? Well, it just meant that you did not recite anything. So you just recited Fatiha. So in essence, your prayer is still valid, right? Because if you missed a sunnah in the prayer, there's no harm on you.
No, that is not my question. To be valid or not, will this recitation be considered for the musalli?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so since validity is not the issue, then it comes down to extra reward. I think at least if it doesn't count as reciting surah in the salat, at least I think he would get the reward of listening to the Quran, sama' al-Quran. So even if he doesn't get the ajr of reciting the second surah in the salat, I think he still would get the ajr of listening to the Quran. And this is still better than nothing. Combined with the fact that he's now more disciplined, that he's, that he is praying every day and he's, enjoying the recitation. I think those things hopefully would be, complementary.
What if someone said to us, after we say that to him, what you have mentioned, if someone said, we're talking about ibadah, about an act of worship, and in Islam, not allowed to approve any act of worship without a proof, a particular and specific proof. So what proof can we give to approve this, to prove that part, especially that he will listen to a recitation of someone is not in prayer with him and will be counted for him? What such a proof will be used for that?
Yeah, I don't think there is a perfect proof or a specific proof. The only proofs we would have in that case, to my knowledge, is the general proofs, such as فَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا, proofs like that, which are not, you're right, they're not specific to prayer, but they're general proofs. I think our safety net, however, what I mentioned earlier, is that the worst that can happen is that this listening won't be counted, right? So in that case, he doesn't lose anything. He doesn't gain anything, but he doesn't lose anything either. So he just stood there and he listened. Maybe worst case scenario, he didn't get any reward, let's say. But I don't think it would affect his prayer, so there's nothing to lose.
What do you say about Abu Hanifa when he said, if a person not in prayer corrected an imam, the salah will not be valid for the imam and ma'mumin? Like I'm leading the prayer and I have a mistake. Then someone is not in the prayer, corrected me. My prayer and ma'mumin will be invalid, will be not valid, because someone outside of the prayer corrected me.
So your logic is, if let's take that as a valid opinion and that it's supported by proof, it seems like in this case, someone outside the prayer is in a way influencing the prayer, in this case by correcting, and the other case by reciting. So he's also influencing the prayer of the individual who's listening. So you're saying that's where the qiyas is, or where the similarity is? Is that what you're?
No, I don't believe that we have to is allowed for us to use the qiyas for al-ibadat, for the act of worship.
No, I'm saying, like, you bring in the example of Abu Hanifa. Is it to show me the similarity between that and the case we have at hand?
Just what I understood from that fatwa, that he is making separation between the one inside the prayer and the one outside of the prayer. They totally separated, and they will not affect each other or benefit each other.
I see.
Wallahu
And
a'lam.
in our case, the recitation is affecting the one in prayer. I see. Yeah, it could be right. I mean, I'll be interested to see what his evidence was. It'd be interesting to see that. But yeah, I mean, I could be totally wrong. I'm just telling you my opinion. Like I said, I could be wrong. But because I don't see the harm of invalidating the prayer, and because I see the benefits of both discipline and this spiritual togetherness, these are the only reasons I have the opinion I have. But
the reason why
no
I
one follows me, so there's no harm.
The reason why I asked you, because this issue is a big issue right now, because a lot of people do not memorize Quran. And
yes.
I feel sad for them, wallahi. They will not go to al-masjid, and also they don't memorize, and some of them cannot read Arabic, cannot read the Quran.
Exactly.
Maybe none in the house will be able to read. So we try to find if this is approved by Shara, because for me, I can't involve my opinion or my thought regarding any ibadat, any act of worship. I have to follow the proof only. So anyhow, if we find the proof to support that part, okay, then I will be happy to introduce it to the community to help people. That's why I'm asking you to support me and give me some help in this point.
I mean, this is what I know so far. Unfortunately, we may not be able to find an exact proof because, this is unprecedented. I mean, this idea even of virtual prayer is unprecedented. I mean, no time in the past we had the technology to even do that. So this is in a way a new event, like a nazila, like a new mas'ala. So it's a little hard from that respect. I'm aware that there is a book written by a person who claims that this is okay. I haven't had a chance to read it. If I find the book, inshallah, I'll send it to you to see if he has any proof. But it seems like he has written about it in some elaborate way. But as we know, the vast majority of scholars have said no. As a congregational prayer,
if you say majority, sorry to stop you, interrupt you, I'm sorry. If you say majority of the scholars, then can you mention one of the names of the scholars who allowed that? Because all the shuyukh and scholars, I receive the knowledge from them, or I take their fatwas. Even in the new masail like this, I try to copy. Sometimes I make myself, and I cannot understand, I cannot know anything, and copy only, okay, scholars, especially in this masail. So can you mention one of the names of the scholars we can copy or depend on?
No, so when I say majority, is because I allow myself. I'm hesitant to say consensus because of what Imam Ahmad says. How do you know that there's no one who had, disagreed with you? So that's the only reason I refrain from saying consensus, because it's so hard to accomplish consensus these days.
But Imam Ahmad did that statement, and he used to consider the ijma'. So he said that only in some certain masail, which is masail has a room for differences, but one of his source of Islam is al-ijma'. So I think this will not be like.
But it could be the ijma' al-awwalin, yani the first few generations. Anyway, I'm not gonna go into debate about that. I just say it احتياطا, يعني when I say يعني الجماعة or the جمهور, احتياطا, يعني not to say ijma'.
But you don't have any name in your mind now.
No. Like I said, there's only that risala I saw. I haven't read it, but he claims that he there's evidence for not for doing the virtual prayer. But the other reason I'm cautious is because I think the fatwa is focused on the jama'ah aspect. And I agree with them that you cannot have jama'ah in a virtual way. But I don't know if they've considered the nuances I've discussed. Like, can we, for example, and I don't know if it was posed, that question, was it even asked? Can we have virtual prayer while everybody considers it individual prayer, and while telling people that please recite Fatiha, recite everything in the prayer, but use, you know, that time to, you know, for reciting other surah to listen to the imam. I don't know if that question was asked in such a way to these scholars. It seems like the scholars are just given a general fatwa that we cannot have congregational prayer from a distance, and I totally agree with that. And I listed the reasons, right? So I don't know if they were asked that specific question. That's why I'm also refraining. Now, if they're asked specifically about that and they all agree, alhamdulillah, I'm with them, inshallah. But I don't think they were asked that question.
طيب جزاك الله خيرا Sheikh Anas. I don't want to take the time of the group, but I'm willing to read that inshallah risala, that book you said about it. I really need to read it and to see if there is any evidence, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
I'll try my best to find it, inshallah. I hope I can find it now. I'm on the spot. And I hope people enjoyed this conversation. Inshallah, everybody had a benefit.
Sheikh Anas and Imam Ahmed Muharram. Thank you for joining, brothers and sisters. So Sheikh Anas, we are running out of time. If you can lead the dua, inshallah.
Inshallah, يعني quickly. بسم الله الحمد لله. اللهم ربنا بلغنا شهر رمضان. اللهم ربنا أعنا على قيامه. اللهم ربنا أعنا على صيامه. اللهم ربنا بلغنا ليلة القدر. اللهم ربنا احفظنا واحفظ أهلينا واحفظ أولادنا واحفظ آبائنا وأمهاتنا في هذا الوضع الصعب العصيب. اللهم ربنا احفظهم من كل مكروه. اللهم ربنا إنا نسألك العافية لهم ولجميع المسلمين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.